The fundamental role played by wood in medieval bindery is clear and well known nowadays. Here we would like to remember Janos Dirmay, who surveyed the character of the thick and heavy medieval wooden boards. The research initiated by Julia Miller, followed by René Woolcott on American scaleboard bindings, is of more recent date. Regarding Europe, in 1992, Dr. Pickwood raised the issue of the Jewish habit of choosing thin slices of wood as boards. Sylvie Marian, studying Armenian bindings, observed the presence of wood with unusual thickness and orientation of the grain. More recently, Velios and Hani detected the frequent use of wooden boards on Greek modern bindings too in St. Catherine collection. The observation of the use of wooden boards on many books printed or written by the end of the 18th century has been the original starting point for launching on an extensive research project on this topic, looking for an answer to the question, when boards were made of wood? It is generally accepted that the development of the book trade has been the reason for progressive but radical changes in bookbinding craftsmanship. In this connection, reductions in time-consuming operation and the search for cheaper materials have been the main strategies to cope with the rising demand for books. To this end, sewing was accelerated and simplified. Wood would have been replaced by paper boards, laminated, coached, or pulp. In fact, it is not always so easy to understand everything that is involved in such choices. I would like now to bring you for a few seconds to Venice to explain my point. You arrive in Venice by train and you want to reach Rialto. You are pressed for time, but you want to save money. You will need to check one of these options. First, take a Vaporetto. It's quick, 11 minutes journey, but not cheap, and sometimes very crowded too. Second, 20 minutes walking fast, very cheap, but not quick. Or if you are Venetian and you are going to work, Vaporetto is cheaper, faster, but crowded too. What would you choose? What choice would be more convenient when everything is considered? But let's go back to scaleboards. What are they and how to identify them? According to the definition of the term, they are very thin wooden boards, measuring from 1 to 3 millimeters, obtained by splitting blocks of wood with a metal throw. With this premise made clear, a problem is immediately evident. Since in most cases the boards are externally covered with different material and on the inside they are hidden by paste downs, the evaluation of thickness is an impressive science giving some disturbing results. Besides, for the same reason, it's often impossible to identify on the boards any clues, such as tool marks, about how the boards were made. It has therefore been preferred not to limit this research exclusively to scaleboards, but to frame this typology in a wider field, including wooden boards of all thicknesses. The chosen working method to find and quantify the presence of wooden boards has been a database survey, following Dr. Pickwood's assumption that by collecting a significant amount of data for a specific feature, it would be possible to show its evolution over time. The selection of books was made by looking at the books on the shelves. A complete overview of different types of bookbinding made during the era of printing press can be gained by the particular arrangement of books in the Biblioteca Marciana. Imprints from 16th to 19th century are stored all together without distinction of century, size, owner, or provenience. Only incunabula are kept apart. During the last 150 years, incunabula were extensively repaired, and many bindings were replaced. For this reason, the sample relating to the very first Western printed books is rather weak, as well as producing unpleasant sensation when looking at them. To be positive, it has to be stressed that Marciana Library has, in many cases, kept the original bindings. These have been recorded too, and when allowed by the treatment done, the records have been matched with the information of every original feature still present on book blocks, sewing and bands, fly-leaf structure, etc. The 208 records collected refer to 166 imprints and 42 manuscripts. The cross-section of printed books covers the period from 1471, the date of an incunabulum printed in Venice by Janson, the one that you have seen, to 1792, the date of a Venetian martyrologium printed by Baglioni. Of the whole number of 16th up to 19th century bindings collected in one of the library storerooms, 0.3% have wooden board bindings. The selection of manuscript in this survey serves as a validation of the general conclusions. It has been mainly focused on two of the most typical Venetian books, Commissioni Dogali and Mariegole. They collect important official documents that can be well dated historically and mostly use wooden boards right up until the end of the 18th century. Commissioni Dogali bindings were a visible statement of the owner's rank. Mariegole stated the economic power of Venetian corporation. Besides this research, the Museo Correr in Venice holds collection of just over 200 of Mariegole, and more than 3/4 of them are made with wooden boards. So the first very interesting conclusion that follows this research is the continuing use of wooden board binding, covered with leather, full or half, alum toad skin or shagreen, but also parchment, paper, decorated or plain, and using exclusively beech as wood. The second is the significant presence of Venetian imprints. Representing 61% of the whole. A consistent gap isolates this peak from the next larger group, 2%, of 10 books printed in Rome. This is the diagram of the general group of bindings reviewed. And you can see the same diagram, just pointed to scale board bindings. And we have the same amount, bigger amount of bindings printed on books printed in Venice. As expected, Armenian, Jewish, and Greek books are represented in this survey. The three categories had their own printing press as established in Venice. It is particularly on the imprints of the Greek printers that increases numbers of wooden board bindings are found during the 18th century. Iuliano, Glikei, Demetrio Theodosios are names very frequently encountered among books made this way. The bindings that they made were covered with very different materials: leather, parchment, and very often paper. It's also interesting to observe the alternative choice of horizontal or vertical grain, and it becomes very hard to say what was the main reason for it. But let's go back to Rialto. According to the general opinion, choosing wood instead of paper-based board materials would have been an economic reduction in the cost production. Let's examine those structures that can reveal economical measures such as sewing and bending and finishing. A diagram of sewing structures shows a very clear intersection among all-along and abbreviated sewing, settled in the second half of the 17th century. The most frequent type is the raised slit strap double support that survives until the first half of the 16th century, followed by single raised supports still sewn all along. The recessed sewing support on cord appears on a Venetian imprint just after the half of the 17th century. But at this date, on this structure is very seldom used on Venetian books, although it appears frequently on non-Italian bindings. You can see here a Greek book, still sewn with unsupported sewing on wooden boards, very thin. Not scale board, because we have 3.5, but very thin. This observation tells us that Venetian binders maintained high standards in sewing for longer than most of the rest of Europe. Regarding handbands, on Venetian books, they are always accurately sewn with primary and secondary sewing, and sometimes also with crowning cores, while they are often absent or exist as stuck-on handbands on foreign books. Venetian bookbinders using wooden boards took care with operations that were time-consuming but not structural. For edge decoration, the books are very often gilded and goffered or simply gilded until the end of the 18th century. Fastening are quite always present. Also, tooling is quite often present, as you can see in this image. Board preparation required time. Boards were internally beveled in 55% cases, and also scale boards, less than 3 millimeters thick, were treated this way. Only in few cases they were not treated at all. This research is not over yet, and more results will be available in the next month. For the moment, I thank you.